Hello and welcome to Kvikmyndapod, an Icelandic cinema podcast. I'm Rob Watts, and together with my good friend Ellie Cawthorne, we journey through the world of Icelandic cinema. Except today, it's not just Ellie and me, but Natalie's here as well.
Hello.
How are you doing?
I'm all right, thanks. How are you both?
Good, thank you.
Very
Nice to meet
well.
you. Good to have you here.
Yeah, we should explain why Natalie's here, and that is because you were unavailable a few weeks ago. I don't know what you were doing.
I think I was actually surfing in Portugal, so, sorry, priorities.
It's okay. We got I won't say better replacement, but I'll say a quality replacement.
I won't take it too personally.
While you were away, we went to London Film Festival. Much like a couple of years ago, we were lucky enough to get some passes to see the one Icelandic film on the roster, which was great. So in lieu of you, Natalie came along with me. We went to the Curzon in Soho to see Rúnar Rúnarsson's latest film, When the Light Breaks. In Icelandic, it's Ljósbrot. And I think it's safe to say, without giving too much away, we enjoyed it.
So there's not much on the internet about this film. There's a quite enigmatic trailer. What can you tell me about it?
What can we say?
It's going well.
What can we say?
I reckon we can say it's an Icelandic film, which is why we're covering it. It stars a bunch of people we've seen before on a podcast. Now, I don't know whether you've prepared anything, Natalie, but could you sum up this film in a sentence or two?
I can definitely give it a go.
Okay, and before you do that, we should probably respect the director's wishes.
Indeed.
Which is why the trailer is so enigmatic, in that he doesn't like trailers and he doesn't like people to know anything about the films he's made before they've seen them.
Do you know what? I actually back that as an approach. Quite often, if I'm watching a trailer for a film that I know I want to see, I'll watch like 20 seconds of it and then I'll turn it off because trailers are too spoilerific. So I like it.
Definitely. I think this film really benefits from going in cold as well. So going in at LFF, I think that was probably a given. But yeah, definitely one to go in with as little information as possible.
Yeah.
So we'll try and stick to that.
Yeah, I think if any information was out there, it's mostly in Icelandic. So we were all pretty safe there. Okay, then let's see if you can describe it, Natalie.
Okay, I will give it a go. So the film follows the day in the life of an Icelandic young woman called Una. I apologise that my Icelandic pronunciation of names is probably not as good as either of you.
That was pretty good.
Yeah, definitely as good as me.
Thank you. It's an easier name. And yeah, follows her and her group of friends on over a day that starts out quite normal and becomes something less normal.
That is enigmatic.
Yep.
Okay, so what can you tell me if we're not going to delve into the plot here?
What can we say? Well, maybe I'll stick to the kind of facts about stuff that Natalie might not necessarily know. Like I'll be the giver of the basic information that ties this film to the rest of the films we've covered, and Natalie can talk a bit more about what it looks like and that kind of stuff. So we've done a Rúnar Rúnarsson film before. In the first series, I think we did a film called Echo, which is like a series of vignettes about Christmas. And it was sort of half documentary, half fictional. You couldn't really tell the difference. And it was just all about Christmas in Reykjavík mostly. We've seen him before. This is his fourth film. We haven't seen his first two. They haven't been available in the UK. That's Sparrows and Volcano. And this film stars Elin Hall, who we have seen before, and that was Let Me Fall, the film that I'm sure you can remember, Ellie.
Yeah, and her performance in it particularly was really, really impressive.
So raw and so emotional. Natalie, for your information, it was kind of like the worst drug drama ever about teens involved in drugs and
by worse there, Rob, you mean
harrowing, not terrible.
Exactly, yeah. Harrowing, not terrible.
Yes, that's right, and it's amazing. So obviously urge you and everyone to go and see that if you haven't. That's definitely available, I think, maybe still on Prime. And then other familiar faces, we've got Baldur Einarsson, who we saw in Heartstone and Beautiful Beings. So we've kind of watched him grow up from tiny kind of prepubescent kid into, a 20-something-year-old man now. He pops up, as does Katla Njálsdóttir, playing a girl called Clara. Thorstein Bachmann turns up. I mean, he's in everything. So,
Classic.
And the music is by Jóhann Jóhannsson, who's, absolutely massive Icelandic composer, died a few years ago. So that'll do for the kind of facts-based bit for now anyway. Ellie, do you have any specific questions about, what the film might look like? Or
I was going to say, well, if I'm not allowed to ask you about the plot or you're not willing to divulge, then my next question is inevitably about vibes. What's the vibe?
The film is very... So I was thinking of how much the film puts you like right there in the action of what's happening to these people over this day, which might sound unsurprising for a kind of 24-hour period of a film. But it never feels schlocky or overly intense. These characters are going through a really extraordinary experience and a huge range of different emotions, and those emotions and feelings are kind of colliding and changing and shifting all the time. But there is a real sense of peace and observation to the film, which was really quite profound. So it really puts you in there with, particularly with the character of Una and with her friends, but it allows you to just take that observational route. And the film is beautiful to look at. So not only is the character work and your position in it as the audience really subtle, but it is visually beautiful as well.
I mean, in both those senses, it does sound like a lot of the kind of classic Icelandic stuff that we've seen, that it gives you time, it's slow paced, it's really beautiful and cinematic. So I can kind of, from that description, imagine what's in store.
It just gives the characters space. It's not particularly a wordy film. It begins and ends with a sunset. And I mean, those shots and the light, the film's called When the Light Breaks. And the light in this film is just gorgeous. I read that, they, in order to make sure this film feels real, they filmed at the exact right points every single day to make it, feel like it was just one day. And Una and the other characters go through a lot on this day, and you really feel everything they feel, whether it's just in a solitary look held static for a while, or when they're all together having mini breakdowns or dancing. I think it's not a spoiler to say Hatari, the Icelandic metal band, there's a great scene with their music playing, and it really kind of gets to the core of how everyone's feeling. So that was cool.
Definitely those days. It's really reminiscent of anyone, which I think is probably most people who have had a day that starts off normal and then something, really shocking happens, like whatever that is in your life. That the kind of chaos of that day and the fact that you go through, tons of different emotions, and you could be laughing one minute and crying the next, and it all feels very real. I really got that sense from the film. Those moments felt like very, very genuine, and the performances were incredible at capturing the intimacy of that group, and a group of people who, you can get a real sense of who's better friends with who, and there's a couple of characters that kind of properly meet for the first time, and you get a sense of all of that complexity of their relationships, as Rob says, without a huge amount of exposition or description of the realities of those situations. It's all very much felt and implied. And I mean, the film is what, 1 hour 20 something minutes, and the story is so rich, and you really get a full sense of all of these characters, and then on an incredibly lean runtime.
I'm glad to hear that it wasn't 24 hours long. So it's obviously pretty character driven, but is it touching on anything kind of deeper, or do you think it is just a character study?
I think there is something deeper. I think the characters are all university age, so early 20s, and you really get that sense of a group of people who are on that real precipice of, moving from teenagehood into becoming adults, and, making plans and having dreams for a future that just hasn't even begun to unveil yet. And then that sense of something very immediate and dramatic happens that kind of brings that all into really sharp relief. I could imagine you would imagine that for a lot of the characters in the story, that's will be like one of the most defining moments of their early adulthood. And I think you really do get a sense of that, like, switch between sort of a younger self and an older self throughout. It feels like that it's really saying something about that transition.
Completely. These are characters who, they're barely adults. And Una specifically, it doesn't feel like she has anyone necessarily. So you're watching her deal with this situation for the first time. Maybe she's never had to deal with anything like this before, but now she's an adult, she's on her own. It's like, okay, this is intense. This might be the first time, and how do you get through it without necessarily having that support network?
Yeah, and I think there's another thread in the film around intimacy. I think those moments of intimacy and connection that can be created by two people who don't really know each other very well at all, but in extreme moments or even in ordinary moments, how people can be brought together and sort of share understanding without having to say a lot to each other about what's happening.
Well, you've painted a very intriguing picture for me. And I guess in this chat where we've been avoiding spoilers, if people do want to get more of a sense of what it's about and what we're talking about, they can of course go and watch the trailer, which I think does give you a little bit more. But also I can see from the trailer, as you said, it is very beautiful. I wonder if you could tell me more about that side of things, the cinematography.
Well, it's by Sophia Olsen, who has worked with Rune on every one of his projects. So it's going to look stunning. And they use like specific colors and shots just to kind of keep things focused on Una herself and not get carried away kind of with the drama of it all. And yeah, it's beautiful. But you begin with these sunsets and that kind of motif of kind of burnt orange and pastels. The beauty of when you see Iceland, when it's pictured for tourists or for any picture of Iceland, really, you never really see it like shitting it down like it does like every day. And it sort of starts with that picture book image, and it manages to sustain that despite the story being kind of the opposite almost.
I think, yeah, I really agree. And I think it's that, and like, forgive me, because obviously I'm not as familiar with Icelandic cinema as both of you. I think I've seen Lamb, and I think that's pretty much it, probably like a lot of other people. So I don't know how typical this is for the country at large, but yeah, it would be really tempting, I think, for a different filmmaker, or if it was set somewhere else, to lean into bleakness in the visual language of the film. And it never really does. It always feels like you're seeing something very real, but and it feels authentic, but it never feels bleak or grimy, even though like a lot of the like locations, for example, except for the sunset scenes that Rob's mentioned, are um it is very urban. Like, they are a group of like young people who are in a band, and they're in a lot of bars, and you can imagine that kind of aesthetic, but it never feels bleak or dark. It feels what it is, like youthful, hopeful in the face of an experience that is quite harrowing for all of them.
Yeah, it's hopeful. And I think that's one of the things I feel and why I keep going back. Because when the light is the way it is in this film, it's just the most gorgeous place. And it's like fills me with a sense of like, we could do anything here. Could not necessarily be anything, although most Icelandic people are multiple things, as we've learned across this podcast. And it's weirdly reflective of a lot of the weather I've seen in real life, even though it doesn't have any scenes of like absolute torrential rain or snow, because we're in the summer. So that's kind of nice. And that's reflected as well in the score, which I mentioned was by Jóhann Jóhannsson. And it's just kind of one motif, really. This track called Odi et Amo, which is Latin, I think, for the love and the hate. And that, I guess that it's just such a beautiful kind of mix of strings and this electronic vocal. I don't know, it just resonates really well, works perfectly with the rest of the film. Because we never hear what the band actually sound like in this film, which is probably a good idea.
You can imagine it though, right? I mean, maybe it's a stereotype, but like the age that they are and sort of how they dress, you're like, I think I can imagine the sound.
It's interesting because Ellen Hatt is a musician herself. She's done all kinds of stuff. She won the Reykjavik Grapevines Award for Best Album last year. So she's pretty good. So there must have been talk about them having a scene of the band, but I think it's a good idea not to do that.
Any final notes, concluding notes?
I'm trying to avoid saying something about her appearance because I was like, it feels reductive, but I think it is also really interesting.
Do it.
So yeah, the character of Una, she she is presented as very vulnerable in the sense that she doesn't wear any makeup. She's got very, very short hair, like very androgynous way of dressing, and as I understand it, I think that's quite different from the way that the actress like usually presents in real life and also in different roles that she's been in. And it does feel reductive to say, oh well, this is how the female star of the film looked, but you really do get, I think it was really important to the way that she played this character. You really feel like you are just right there with her and there is nothing in between who she is and the vulnerability, even though she's doing so much behind her eyes and she's controlling her expressions and her emotions all of the time. So it's all really behind her face. But I think having that sort of vulnerability and naturalness to the way that she's presented in the film was really important, and something that came up in the Q&A after the film about the choices to do that. And I understand she had quite a drastic haircut, for example, to kind of step into that authenticity of that role.
Well, you've seen the trailer, Ellie. She looks remarkably different.
Yeah, she does, definitely. I like your interpretation, Natalie, that it's basically just like there's no barriers between you and her emotion. I like that.
I think you can see that just in the trailer or even in some of the stills. It's a fantastic performance, for which she recently won Best Actress at the Chicago Film Festival. So she's getting recognition. We're not overselling it. She is fantastic. And this film was at Cannes this year, where it opened The Uncertain Regard. And talking of Cannes, I thought since we're here, we could talk about a new short film which was at Cannes last year, which has just dropped on Disney Plus.
And when you say short, it is short, 6 minutes long.
I know,
You
right?
can easily just sneak it into your little break at work. I did find this a very interesting little offering to sit on Disney Plus. I know that they're like famously diversifying their output and everything they do, but who's finding this tiny little gem of a short film, art house short film on Disney Plus?
No, I've got no idea how it's ended up there or what's going on with it, but it's there, so I thought we should probably cover it. So what we're talking about is a film called Fár, that's F-A-R, with a little thingy on it. And it's directed by Gunnur Martinsdóttir Schlüter, who's German Icelandic and an actress. You've not done so much of the describing, Ellie, so why don't you just quickly tell us what this film is, what the story is?
This probably is quite easy to describe. We essentially follow, or we see things I think kind of from one woman's perspective, and she's in a business meeting and a seagull hits the glass of the cafe that this meeting's happening in. But I think really what it's about is like a kind of encounter between the modern world that we live in today, full of tech, in which we're so like dissociated from nature and our kind of animal selves, and then like a little moment in which nature interrupts that and makes itself very loudly known.
Yeah, completely. And it's interesting. So the film itself is set within this cafe, which is Reykjavik Roasters. I've been there a couple of times.
Oh, I knew that you'd be able to tell me which cafe it was. So classic.
But what I've learned over sort of the 14 years since I first went to Iceland is how much Reykjavik has been built up, and it's a very different city to what it was 14 years ago. Much more glass, much more concrete, much more modern. And yeah, like you say, this film feels like it's just sort of saying, guys, we need to take a step back, look at the nature around us. Specifically, I guess if you're in a coastal town, you've got a lot of sea life, a lot of bird life, and maybe we should pay more attention to it. Because I guess the central thing in this film is whether our main character should put the seagull out of its misery. Would you do that, Natalie?
Yes, I was thinking about this earlier. So I did what Ellie said earlier, where I had a very short break and thought, oh gosh, I don't know if I'm going to have time to watch this, and then did, because it's obviously very short. And it reminded me of a time that I had to fish a magpie that had accidentally come down our chimney out of the room. Everyone else in my family, including both of my parents, abandoned me, and so I was left to usher the bird out of the room. I don't believe I had to kill it in that moment, but I think I probably would. I can see her perspective. She is attending to a situation that everyone seems either willing to gawp at or to ignore completely, and she is focused on connecting with this seagull and helping it move on.
I don't know if I would have the guts to do it. My friend had to twist a pigeon's head off once. I don't know if he twisted it off. He tells it that he twisted it off because it was in a fireplace and it stuck its head through and then it got stuck, and so he had to kill it.
Wow.
Anyway, but also I think I liked the way what you said about it, her kind of communing with this bird. But I think also it's a sense that we need to pay attention to nature, but also like within all of us, we're all on our smartphones, we're all civilized, we're in business meetings, we're talking about hot tubs.
Is that what they were talking about? I couldn't figure it out.
I'm not sure it even matters, does it? Like, it sounded so boring and indecipherable.
And we're into tech and fancy coffees, but when it comes down to it, we're all animals. Can you smash another animal to death? It's like inside, everybody is an animal as well.
Yeah, that's true. And I guess also, as an adult, you sort of learn certain behavioral norms and stuff. And then we see all those children come over and they've kind of...
And they're like, can I kill it?
Yeah, can I kill it? Or, which is the other, is that they are like, what the hell? You don't kill it. Why are you killing it? They don't know, but obviously the innate thought of being able to kill it is also there. And maybe there's a point there where we should be thinking about how to educate our kids on nature, what to do in this kind of situation, or how to even avoid it happening in the first place.
I also have to say, pedant's point, but I don't think I'd smash its head with a rock. I think I'd twist it, I'd break its neck.
Would you? Because seagulls are pretty massive. Like, that's not a pigeon neck. That's like a tree trunk? Not quite, but you get the idea.
Well, the seagulls round you.
Well, we're in Bristol. They are massive. They're like bloody pterodactyls.
And aggressive too.
It was a very biblical ending of the seagull. I will give it that.
Didn't shy away from the act.
Nope.
I was thinking, I recently watched a Grand Designs, and one of the things we could do in order to be a bit more, open to nature being around our modern buildings is this Grand Design. I can't remember where it was, on the northeast coast or something in the UK. They had this special glass that's got like all squiggles all over it, which you can't really see, but it provides like a reflection for birds, so they just don't go anywhere near the windows, and they don't obviously knock themselves out or kill themselves. So there are ways to avoid it. Yeah,
that's sometimes why you have stickers on big glass windows of bird shapes and stuff. It's for that purpose.
Oh, I've never seen that, but totally makes sense.
It was a point of like real authenticity in the short film, where I live on the 20th floor with a very, not to give away my penthouse status, I wish, that has like a very massive window, and there are about 3 different sort of like grease mark imprints of birds on it. And so when the seagull does smack into the window and leaves that impression, I was like, I mean, that is what it looks like. So well done to them on that.
So you don't have those fancy windows or the stickers?
I don't, I'm sorry to say.
So you're not doing anything to help?
I rent. Look, I'll bring it up with the building manager.
Yeah, I think if there's any take home from this short film, it's that you need to talk to your landlord or whatever.
It's what I hoped I would get from this podcast recording.
Yeah, so I mean, again, we're in Reykjavík. It looks lovely, and I can say the coffee there's very nice. So I don't know what we'll expect to see in the future from Gunnur Martinsdóttir Schlüter, but it is filmed by Eli Arenson. So you said you saw Lamb, and that's the only Icelandic film you've seen. Same cinematographer.
Well.
This is the kind of connections we've got on this podcast. Everyone is related to everyone.
Is it because the Icelandic film industry is particularly small?
It's quite small. Ever growing, though. Ever growing. We're doing our best to kind of promote it. So I'm, as the industry expands, I reckon we can be part of the reason. Don't you think?
Oh, I mean, that's very egotistical, but yeah, sure.
So yeah, I think we should leave it there. It's gone even longer than I expected, which is great. But just so everyone listening knows, just to reiterate, Faur, which it's 5 minutes long. Just check it out if you've got Disney Plus. And When the Light Breaks is due to be released in spring 2025. So keep your eyes peeled. We will hopefully be able to cover it again then and actually talk about what happens. But for now, thanks so much, Natalie, for coming with me, watching this film, and talking so eloquently about it, and without giving anything away.
My absolute pleasure.
And thanks, Ellie, for just, doing a bit of my job.
Oh, yeah. I mean, all I did was basically say, what happens in this film I haven't seen.
So that is what Rob usually does.
Yeah.
Oh, pretty much, yeah.
Easy.
Yeah.
That's why being the host is the best thing you can do on a podcast. Brilliant. Well, thank you both. Thanks everyone for listening. Tack God bless.